ancient Greece, life was full of new information, amazing architecture, philosophical genius, leaders to last hundreds of years, and a recorded history just beginning to take place. The achievements of these times are still with us today. They're being taught in our schools and used in our architectural field. Our everyday lifestyle is founded on ancient Greek principles and culture. Over time, Greek art has become famous and almost iconic. Some of the most influential art of the Western world comes from Acropolis itself. The ancient art decorated architecture such as temples and public buildings, reflecting Greeks' views on the world and their religion. Geometric patterning was a huge contributor to the amazing results, along with their human forms seen in statues and small terracotta figurines. Originally, Greek statues were awkward and fake-looking, but progressively they got more and more realistic, finally peaking in the Classic Age. This was with the help of 4th and 5th century CE sculptors who applied the rules of anatomy to human form. We don't have many of these statues today since stone broke easily and metal was melted for reuse. Pottery, however, is much more common. The Greeks used clay pots, vases, and jars for just about everything. The clay artifact containing religious and mythical scenes like the statues grew more and more realistic as time went on. Clay terracotta figurines were often given to children, offered to the gods or goddesses, or buried with the dead. Most of our knowledge of Greek art actually comes from stone and clay objects.
The Greeks are famous for their architecture, but the basis of that would be their columns. The three main types of columns were the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. The Doric columns had no base and were the most simple of the three. Ionic columns were slimmer, straighter ones, and the Corinthians were similar to Ionic with more decoration and style. Stone and marble were the main materials used in architecture, and everything was carefully carved. 4 famous temples are still standing today. The Parthenon, a temple to the goddess Athena, was built to advertise the glory of Athens. It stood in the city's Acropolis, was burned in 1687 after the Ottoman invasion, and rebuilt in Nashville, Tennessee. The Temple of Zeus was completed around 460 BCE, and the Temple of Artemis around 430 BCE. The Temple of Poseidon is perched on cliffs overlooking the Aegean Sea. Temples of gods and goddesses were built to be admired from both afar and up close. They all follow the same basic structure for the most part, but temples from Ionia were more extravagant. Literature in ancient Greece all had similar themes: war or quests involving demigods, gods, or mortals. During the Archaic period, poets' works were spoken, not written. This was the period of literature from Homer with famous pieces like the Iliad and the Odyssey. The Iliad was written in 8th century BCE, and it described the final year of the Trojan War, the conflict between the Greek city-states and the city of Troy. The Odyssey is about the voyage of the hero Odysseus, who battles monsters and resists the temptations of sirens with the knowledge that his wife Penelope is waiting for him. The classical period is a prominent part of drama and theater. A major playwright during this period was Aeschylus, whose plays were centered mostly on Greek myths. His plays were some of the first to have spoken dialogue between 2 characters. Another playwright is Sophocles, who wrote 120 plays, 20 of which were actually good, 7 of which survived, and only 3 of the 7 are complete. Euripides wrote plays mostly on myths of gods, was famous for adding second acts to plays, but was not very successful. Aristophanes was the author of many Greek comedies, and 11 of his works survive today. His actors wore grotesque masks and told obscene jokes, and many of his plays had a moral or social lesson that made fun of Athens. The people of Greece not only had rich culture and wondrous works of art, but great advancements in the field of math and science. There were 2 main figures in mathematics and physics, Pythagoras and Archimedes. Pythagoras was known mainly for the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, to measure the length of any right triangle, as well as finding the shape itself. He also discovered the measurement of pi, the method of finding the circumference of a circle, and the basic rules of geometry. Archimedes worked more with physics. He discovered the physical laws of both displacement and buoyancy. Another part of early Greek science is astronomy. Some of the best astronomers of their time come from Greece, starting with Aristotle. He was the first to build a model of the universe, including all known observations. The observations all revolved around Earth, but it was still a step in the right direction. His work was a basis for modern astronomy. Pythagoras was the first Greek to propose the idea of a round Earth. Religion, of course, said otherwise, and the priests didn't approve of this interpretation. Aristotle's first duo discovery was with Plato. They both believed in a geocentric model with Earth at the middle, but this was because of a mystical argument rather than scientific proof. Aristotle went back to his original lone work to find the circumference of the Earth. In 310 BCE to 290 BCE, Aristarchus of Samos presented the idea that the Sun was at the center of our solar system. It became more than just a theory when it explained all of the flaws in the geocentric model. Hipparchus, one of the most well-respected Greek astronomers ever, started as a mathematician but turned his knowledge over to science. He calculated a solar month with only 1 second of error and a solar year with only 6 minutes of error. He made a celestial catalog of 1,080 stars with their latitude and longitude, but before that, one had already been made by Timacharis. When compared, the two charts had a 2-degree gap, which was later proven to be real even in space. Greek astronomers are most well known for their work with constellations, putting stars and myths together. Constellations were put into categories by season. Today, we can find planets using these constellations thanks to the ancient Greeks.
A lot of very popular and useful technology was made by the ancient Greek, like the watermill, the odometer, the alarm clock, the catapult, the thermoscope, and the steam engine. The watermill is used for metal shaping, agriculture, and most importantly, milling. The watermill originated as the paratrora wheel created by Philo of Byzantium. The odometer is one of the most widely used instruments in present day. Odometers measure the distance traveled by a vehicle. This omnipresent instrument originated in ancient Greece. Though it was first described by Vitruvius around 27 BCE, evidence points towards Archimedes of Syracuse as its inventor. The alarm clock originated from ancient Greece, but the ones used by the ancient Greeks were nothing like the present ones. They used to integrate mechanisms to time the alarm, which would sound off delicate water organs or pebbles in the drums. It was created by Ctesibius. The catapult was used by a Greek task force against Martia in 397 BCE. It was created by Diodorus Siculus in the 1st century BCE. Archimedes refined the catapult in the 3rd century BCE. The thermoscope was created by Philo of Byzantium. The thermoscope had a similar concept to Galileo's air thermometer. The steam engine was created by Heron during the 1st century BCE. It was made as a toy called the Aeopod. Ancient Greece was filled with very famous philosophers: Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates didn't expound his views assertively. He posed questions that encouraged reflection on human issues, particularly on ethics and morals. He suggested that humans could lead ethical lives and that honor is more important than wealth, fame, or other superficial attributes. He insisted on the need to reflect the purpose of goals in life in elaborating those views. Socrates often played the role of Godfrey, who subjected traditional ethics teachings to critical scrutiny. Plato was the most zealous disciple of Socrates. Inspired by Socrates' reflection, Plato elaborated a systematic philosophy of great subtlety. Plato largely represented his mentor's views. As time passed, Plato formulated his own thoughts into a systematic vision. The cornerstone of Plato's thoughts was his theory of forms or ideas. It disturbed Plato that he could not gain the satisfactory intellectual control over the world. Plato developed his belief that the world in which we live is not the only one. He came up with this trying to answer the question, how was it possible then to understand virtue as an abstract quality? And only by entering the worlds of forms or ideas is it possible to understand the true nature of virtue. In effect, then Plato advocated an intellectual aristocracy. The philosophical elite would work at functions for which their talents best suited them. Originally a disciple of Plato, Aristotle came to distrust the theory of forms or ideas. He considered artificial intellectual constructs unnecessary for understanding the world. He believed that philosophers could rely on their senses to provide accurate information about the world and then depend on reason to sort out its mysteries. Aristotle, like Plato, also explored the nature of reality in subtle metaphysical works. and he devised rigorous rules of logic in an effort to construct powerful and compelling arguments. But Aristotle also wrote on biology, astronomy, psychology, ethics, politics, and literature. His work provided such a logical and comprehensive vision of the world that his later disciples called him the master of those who know. Greek historian Herodotus is widely considered the father of history. He was one of the first to collect his materials through a systematic approach, traveling the Mediterranean and gathering the native people's oral history of whatever subject he was studying. In fact, the only thing he really did study was the origin and events of the Greco-Persian War. His findings were put into a book called the Histories, which were later split up into 9 separate books, each named after one of the Greek muses. Not only did the Histories record the Greco-Persian War, but they also provided geographic and ethnographic information about both Greece and Persia. These writings are generally reliable, but the same cannot be said for Herodotus himself. One of the titles given to him by many scholars today is the Father of Lies. This is due to him putting his own fables in some of his writings. The same scholars could give the real father of history title to Thucydides. His account of histories are scientific based, and while he recorded the Peloponnesian War, he focused mainly on trying to explain human nature and behavior.
Ancient Greece shaped how we live, with many contributions in all of the different aspects of society. If they hadn't made the advancements that they did, we wouldn't be where we are today.